Don't be absent, okay? Oh, you're out now. Okay. Just a few. It's okay if I write all over? Circle things in red? I'll have to do something with that.
This meeting of the Haltom City Council is called to order. The invocation and pledge announcements will be made by Mayor Pro Tem Branson.
Thank you, Mayor. Leading the prayer tonight will be Ryan Murphy, Director of Love Never Fails, and the pledge will be led by Matt Ryan, the Star Scout from Troop 32.
Please bow with me in prayer. Father, we just thank you this night that we can come to you in a safe and a free country, Lord. And we ask that tonight you would just anoint every speaker, that you'd give them grace, that you'd give them just the communication skills they need to go over every item. And Lord, we just thank you that you've been with us all week and that you're here among us tonight, Lord, that you are over the governments and you're over the rulers of this world, and that you come in and that you care about our business that we're doing tonight. So we ask that you protect our city tonight and in the midst of danger, protect our country, Lord, and our state in the midst of terrorism. We ask that you protect our state and our schools that are starting tomorrow, that you'd be with all the teachers and the students tomorrow, Lord. And we pray for a special protection and a wonderful day tomorrow, a wonderful school year without any hitches, Lord. You just be over them and blessing them. And we pray for every council member tonight, every department in the city tonight, from the police down to the city street workers. We just ask you to be with them this week, this month. And we just thank you. We just bless you. And Lord, we dedicate this night to you. And we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Appreciate you gentlemen helping us with that. Thank you. Announcements tonight, Ms. Fran Burns. Fran?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I hope everybody's aware of the watering restrictions that residents and businesses are not allowed to use their sprinklers to water their landscapes from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. every day. Hand watering, of course, is allowable during this time, or using soaker hoses is allowed. The alternative to turf that requires a lot of water might be considered by some citizens. Instead of trying to maintain a lawn that takes a lot of water, we're encouraging people to look into xeriscaping and using plants that don't take a lot of water, and to let people know how the plants that are usable in this kind of Texas native, Texas hot weather. We have the Texas Smartscape CD available here at City Hall, and there also is a link now on our webpage. So if you'd like to learn about how to plant Texas-friendly landscape in your own yard or your own business, you can go onto our website and just click that link and it'll take you right there. Tomorrow is the first day of school here in Haltom City with BISD, and HCPD is asking the public to exercise extreme caution as children who are often preoccupied and unaware of their surroundings, and also excited as they arrive and go home from school, aren't always paying attention to traffic. Police personnel will monitor motorist speed and compliance with our traffic laws. School zone fines can range anywhere from $200 to $1,000 plus court fees. And HCPD offers the following safety tips. Know the schools and crosswalks in your daily driving pattern. Know the school zones that you pass through and their effective hours. Pay special attention to children walking to school and at school bus stops. Pay attention to school buses and stop when they are picking up or leaving off children. Allow extra time to get to your destination this week. Educate your children about school safety. Talk to your children about strangers and that they should never open the door to someone they don't know. Teach children that it's okay to say no and to trust their own instincts. And please instruct children about the use of 911. And if you'd like further information about safety, please call Community Services at HCPD at 222-7036. There is going to be a seminar at the Haltom Senior Center on August the 30th. That's a Wednesday evening, and it's called Safe Computing. It's put on by a number of different a consortium of groups that include the AARP, the Department of Commerce, FTC, Microsoft, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and others. This is at the Senior Center, which is located at 5000 Bernice Street, and the workshop starts at 5:30. It's open to students K through 12, parents, and over 50 individuals as well as senior citizens. It's free, and if you'd like more information about this seminar, you can call the Senior Center at 834-8021. There are a couple of police district meetings coming up. Police District number 5 meeting will take place at 7 p.m. Thursday, August 24th at the Diamond Oaks Country Club. And the District number 4 meeting will take place at 7 p.m. Thursday, August 31st at the First Baptist Church of Fort Worth. That's off of Loop 820 at Haltom Road. There'll be a blood drive benefiting the son of veteran Haltom City firefighter Terry Waters, and that's scheduled from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday. That's this Monday, August 21st, at the Central Fire Station on Broadway Avenue. The younger Waters was diagnosed earlier this year with leukemia. All blood types will be accepted during the drive, and in addition, representatives from the National Marrow Donor Program will be on hand to accept those who would like to be included in the organization's registry. And that's what I have tonight. Thank you very much.
Fran, just a moment there. On the police district meetings, who should attend those? District
4 is the area that runs from, it's west, yeah, go ahead. Okay, I hope you heard that. It's like the central part of town. I think District 5. District 4 is the northwest part of town, yes. You're right. Stanley Keller, all the way up to Western Center Boulevard to Beach, and then to, is it 377 or Haltom? I think it's Haltom Road. So, but I think they're getting someone from...
Well, I mean, is this for like residents or business owners?
Business owners and residences who would like to come and learn about crime prevention.
That's what I was looking for. Yeah,
Chief. Yes, anybody that wants to come to these meetings is invited, even if you don't live in that part of town, but they're geographically scheduled so that people that live in that part of town can bring issues specific to where they live and where they work.
Thank you for rescuing us. You bet. And thank you, Fran. I also want to say just give recognition to the National Night Out participants and organizers. The kickoff up at the rec center was really outstanding. A little warm, but was really well attended. And on National Night Out, some of us took the tour. I think there were 5 or 6 parties that were in the various neighborhoods, and they all were very well attended. Lots of good food and many concerned citizens out there, and appreciate all those who participated and helped organize that effort, and thank them very much. Moving on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is considered to be self-explanatory and will be enacted by the council with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless they are removed from the consent agenda. Approval of the consent agenda authorizes the city manager to implement each item in accordance with staff or board recommendations. The consent agenda consists tonight of items 1 through 11 minus items 8 and 11 have been withdrawn from the consent agenda. Items 8 and 11 are withdrawn from the consent agenda, so it'll be those that are left. I'll consider a motion. Ms. Branson.
Thank you, Mayor. I move we move for approval of the consent agenda as presented, and that would be without items 8 and 11.
Mr. Cabana.
That's for a second, Mayor.
It's been moved and second to approve the consent agenda minus items 8 and 11. Any discussion? If not, please register your votes. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Item 8 is architectural services, consideration and action for approval of a change order to the architectural services contract for the Haltom City Public Library. The Assistant City Manager will now bring that to us.
I was afraid you forgot my name, Mayor.
Mr. Barnett.
Thank you, sir. Mayor and council, ladies and gentlemen, November the 6th, 2001, the voters approved a referendum to construct a library within our city, a brand new library of about 28,000 to 30,000 square feet. That was a $4 million bond issue. In January of 2004, an architectural firm, F&S Partners, was selected and awarded a contract in the amount of $297,000 for the basic services for that architectural design. Since that time, although the design of the library was in its early stages, the city was in the acquisition to finalize the location where the library would be located. That took some time to get concluded. That moved into 2006 before we finally acquired that land. So it was over 2 years after we awarded the contract to F&S Partners in the sum of $297,000, they were able to finalize the site to where the construction would be completed and the design. The amount, what you have before you tonight is a change order due to the increase to the basic services since that time for F&S Partners to complete the architectural, the geotech, and the engineering on this facility. Although the increases to the basic services was included in the original contract, and they did have the ability, in case some unforeseen circumstances did come up, and unfortunately did, we had to delay in the land acquisition for the facility. The fact still remained that they did have the ability to come back to the city in case some services were included and did increase as part of that original contract. We're anticipating now that although I present to you some conceptual plans and some schematics tonight, we have not finalized those. This is still a work in progress. We're still working on the finalization of what this library is going to look like as far as the exterior. We're also looking at the ingress and egress to the facility itself. But however, with all that said, since the time that the original contract was approved by the City Council, there has been increased cost to the basic services for the engineering firm of F&S Partners. We anticipate the complete design for this library to be be completed by the first of the year. I was hoping that we'd have this completed by fall, but it looks like we'll have that completed by the first of spring. And then we'll have construction hopefully to begin in early this next spring, which is a pretty fast track for us to get this completed. With the approval of this tonight, I plan to make a presentation to the Library Board on the 22nd, again showing the preliminary designs and the architectural renderings that we're moving forward for completion. So with that tonight, I'm looking for the approval of a change order to the original $297,000 for the architectural services to F&S Partners for an increase of $74,000, bringing that total to $372,000. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chuck, when the voters approved the $4 million bond, the square footage at that time, concrete and steel, I assume was figured in, was 28 to 30,000 square foot. And it was just the plans. We didn't have any place to put the plans. What square footage are we looking at now? Can you elaborate on that some?
I'm still trying to stay within the same original approval by the voters. That's what the voters approved, was a 28,000 to 30,000 square foot library, and that's what we're trying to build.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Assistant City Manager, would you, I think I had asked a couple of questions back in pre-council chambers about this. You mentioned something about the land acquisition, and my anticipation is part of the cost of the $74,000 increase is the switch or the change from one position on that land or that piece of property to another, and as a result, a change in the engineering schematics is. And there was something else too. Could you mention those two? He mentioned two things back there. The architect mentioned two things, and that was one of them, I believe. What was the other one? Do you recall?
Well, one was let me answer the second question first. Okay. One was the increase to some of their basic services for their subcontractors and their engineers that they hire for the geotech and some of the engineering designs. What we have received so far are the preliminary designs, and those have been given to a cost analyst who will then try to define out what the actual cost will be for us to build a 28,000 to 30,000 square foot building based on where we have got the site plan or the footprint to where that library is going to be located. The second thing was that originally they were looking at the design of the library to be located closer to McLean, which is going to put us closer to the industrial district. And of course we had the issue with the railroad and the sound that we needed to identify as far as the construction and relocation. That relocation has pushed the library up to the northeast into that property, closer to the drainage ditch, which is currently there, and we're planning to try to take that, expand on that, make it into some type of water feature so the citizens can enjoy some casual trails, trees, amenities such as that'll go in with the setting with the library. So I think it was two factors. One, originally they were looking in that area and that was going to have 2 points of ingress egress, and then by pushing that up to the northeast, that changed kind of schematics to how we're going to have to line that on the site. So they didn't lose everything as far as the aspects where the parking lot was going to be located and some of those things, but that did increase part of the cost for the engineering.
I was the reason I asked that is also because I think a lot of people anticipate that the energy efficiency portion of building into the structure is going to play into this cost, and I'm anticipating it did not. We had already anticipated that we were going to have energy efficient building, but of course energy efficiency is a wild card at this point, in our time, because the energy costs have gone sky high. But I noticed the architect had also mentioned some things that they were going to do. We're going to lock in the design somewhere around the end of the year, as you said. We can't guarantee that you won't come back with another increase in architectural services because of energy costs and so on and so forth into this building. You
mean I'm going to put my head on the line on this one? I'm not anticipating any additional costs based on what we're looking at currently as far as the architectural fees and the design of the building and et cetera. They have, it's a odd-shaped piece of property. It's kind of like a half moon when you look at it. You go up Haltom Road. You don't have really a square piece of property that you're working with. And so kind of the angled how they push this into the northeast corner, and it fits perfectly with the water feature that would be created. I believe they've addressed the west sun, making sure they don't get a lot of the direct west sun come out of the west, and then you're taking advantage of the east as far as the indirect light for the reading area and et cetera. So they're identifying those things which I think are going to be energy efficient. Now, are there other things we can probably do? We're going to look at those.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Sutton.
Thank you, Mayor. Chuck, 2 questions. We've already ascertained that the design is not complete and it won't be complete until about December. How much have we paid FNS up to this point for the architectural duties that they performed?
Can't remember that off the top of my
Probably
head.
about 40.
40,000?
I think. Well, we had paid them about 40 when we suspended the work. I don't know. I'm not aware of.
Okay.
I don't know how much we may have paid them since they've started up again in the last
Okay.
couple of months. But prior to that, I think it was about 40.
Okay,
I
excellent.
think there was a.
And I think we have had a payment
I think I've
since
approved a
we've.
$17,000.
Yeah, I think we have had a
So
payment.
somewhere 50, 60,000
Yes,
at
sir.
this point, which is,
Right.
roughly a third, maybe something like that. No, actually more than that. Anyways, if a citizen, I assume that the library board is going to be reviewing these plans on an ongoing basis. There'll be interaction with you and the library board, is that true?
Correct.
If a citizen wanted to have some input or to be able to see some of these plans and want to give some input, could they attend the library board meetings?
Well, absolutely. Those are open meetings. Absolutely. We encourage
Okay.
the citizens. They're the ones that voted on this library. They have a right to come and see
Okay.
what we're building.
All right, thanks.
I just want to be clear, when I started FNS on this thing a couple of years ago, we were doing it trying to expedite this thing, trying to give the voters their library at least in as much of a timely fashion as we can. Unfortunately, the land purchase really hung that up, and in hindsight, it's hurt, and we've tried to keep as much as we can of that site. But the site that we originally had it on, at the corner of Haltom and McLean, just when we kept looking at the schematics that they were giving us and how it was going, it just wasn't going to work. I don't think a whole lot of people are going to be real happy with it there, especially when you've got Micah and Liberty Carton within a stone's throw. And no offense to them, but you don't need it near an industrial area. You want it, so that's why we scooted it up to take advantage of whether there's going to be parks going in on that other track, or the Spring Lake Apartments or the Spring Lake Home Development. At least get it closer to that amenity with the drainage channel. Use that instead of having it be a liability, have it be an asset. And so that's why we did that. But with that, it's going to be some extra cost.
And typically, you hire an architect to show you some profiles of what it could look like after
Sure.
they've heard from staff. And so right now is really the beginning of when, just in the first few days or weeks of when we've really kind of got an idea of what that profile might even look like.
Right.
The council was just, in the pre-council, shown some drawings. It was the first time, I think, that we've seen them.
Yeah, that's the first you've seen them now.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck and Leslie, they've been working with them quite a bit.
Right.
During,
Which is a
especially
normal-
in the last couple of months since we've got them back on this thing.
But that's normal when that you have an architect that you hire that gives you some ideas, so you can start having a launching point of talking what it's going to look like. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or discussion on item 8? If not, I'll entertain a motion for the change order. Mr. Sutton.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve change order, the architectural contract for design services for the Haltom City Public Library as read. Agenda item number 8.
Thank you. And Ms. Branson.
That'd be for a second.
And Mr. Hudson, are you for the third again?
That would be third or fourth.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the change order for the contract, architectural services contract for Haltom City Public Library. Any further discussion? If not, please register your vote. That is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Next item on the agenda is item number 11, consideration or action on approval of a reserve officer. You gonna?
Here he comes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This agenda item is to ask you to approve the appointment of our third reserve officer. Officer Jeff Fulfer was sworn in November 3rd, 2003 here in Haltom City. He resigned July 25th of this year to take a position with the Union Pacific Railroad. He attended the South Plains Association of Governments Academy. He's a field training officer. In fact, he was a field training officer for us for a short time before he left. He is a instructor that's qualified as a T-Close instructor, which is the Commission on Law Enforcement, and he's a former DARE officer. And it's our recommendation that you allow us to appoint him as a reserve officer. And I'll entertain any questions.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Reese?
Thank you for pulling this off since I was late, everyone. I had with school starting up, I guess the thing that jumped out to me, and I'd called Tom and spoke about it, was specialized training to deal with gangs. And I guess what I'm looking for is education for not only our children, but maybe for the parents, because there still is, talk going on about, events that we had happening last year. And I guess I'm looking to see I know we have other officers that are qualified with gangs, but I know that we're too, short-handed. So I'm wondering if we would be able to utilize his knowledge and training to hold some type of something, whether it be at the schools or, I don't know, just information to where parents can look for signs, kids can understand the severity of gang-related issues.
I'm not sure I'm following you. He's not a gang instructor. He's a former DARE officer.
He's got specialized training to deal with gangs.
Well, it's a variation of the DARE program that encourages kids, it's taught at the 6th grade level, that encourages kids not to engage in gangs. Part of the problem is going to be with this particular officer is he's not going to be available during school hours, most likely. Some of you that work for the railroad, he's starting out there. The way he explained it to me, he's going to be working 80, 90 hours a week at least in the short term.
I've got 34 years, and if I went back to the union, I could hold an evening job. Yeah. So it takes a while.
Yeah. So what the reserve officers do is they give us about 96 hours a year. We ask them for 8 to 16 hours a month. The minimum is 96 for the year. And they come in, and this particular officer has expressed an interest in coming in and working in patrol. As you know, we have another reserve officer that has a computer background that is helping us with computers. He comes in on the weekends because that's when he's off of his regular job. So we're kind of at the mercy of what they do for a living because they are volunteers. But we could sure approach him about it. And if there were times that he was available during the day and you had a specific school or something you'd like him to visit, we could sure arrange that.
Any other questions for the chief? Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Being a T-Close instructor, all he has to do is get the lesson plan and information and interview a person or two. He'd be able to take it and run with it. It's just a matter of having the time to get into the schools.
That's correct. Yeah, in fact, I'm an instructor. I could do it. But it's a matter of finding the time from his regular job, and we just have to see what he had available and if it would be during the hours that would be conducive to his visiting the schools.
Thanks, sir.
You bet.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Chief Burton.
Thank you.
Any further discussion of Mr. Hutchison?
I'm sorry, I pressed my button. It is burning.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this item? Then, Mr. Hutchison, have you got something else that you'd like? You're tired of coming in third, aren't you?
I will make a motion if you're ready for a motion, Mr.
I'm ready
Mayor.
to entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we accept the police reserve force, the new police reserve officer, Mr. Fulfer, as recommended by the police officer.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Clark?
That's for a second, sir.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept Mr. Fulfer as a reserve officer. Any further discussion before we vote? Please register your votes. That is unanimous. Went on to the regular agenda. Item 12, the property tax rate. Consideration and action on a record vote on setting the preliminary tax rate for fiscal year 2006, 2007, and scheduling of public hearings on the proposed tax rate. Mr. Joel Welch will now tell us about the
Thank you,
proposed
Mayor.
tax rate. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the council. In accordance with the state property tax code, whenever a city council wants to adopt a tax rate that is above the effective tax rate, they must first meet in a regular session and approve a record vote in which they state their intent to adopt a tax rate above the effective rate. I'm going to back up very quickly and define effective rate for just a moment. And the effective tax rate is the tax rate which, when you multiply it by the tax roll, which is all the values in town, will generate the same amount of money as was generated by last year's tax rate. And the purpose of truth in taxation is they ask you to start basically with the effective tax rate. And then if a council deems that it's necessary to adopt a rate above that rate, then they have to take a record vote. At the time they take the record vote, they also have to call for 2 public hearings, schedule the dates of those hearings, and then the staff will publish notices in accordance with law of these 2 hearings. At this point in time, we're asking the council to take a record vote on the tax rate of 56.66 cents. This is 9/10 of a penny more than last year's rate of $55.76 cents. This is this rate is right at 3 cents above the effective tax rate. I went back and looked at the effective tax rate while we were on break. The effective tax rate is 53.4249 cents. This rate is below the rollback rate. So there's not going to be a situation where the rollback rate issues like Bedford had is going to come into play. Like I said, if the council chooses to,
Chuck kind of reacted there for a minute.
oh, I saw his arm raised. Well, Bedford's also taking a chance with it again this year, I noticed. But like I said, we'll be asking the council if they'll consider taking a record vote on the 56.66 cent tax rate. As the city manager is fond of pointing out, and it is entirely accurate to state this is the rate that the council can adopt, but no more. They can adopt less if they decide to after the public hearings, but they cannot adopt a higher rate once they set this rate. And to illustrate the impact, a person whose house is valued, the average value of a house in Haltom City right now is $85,055. If it's a homestead, there's a 10% value taken off of that. So if you multiply the rate that is proposed times that value, that dollar bill or that tax bill for that customer will be $6.89 more for the year than it would have been if we used the 55.76 cents rate. The 53 cent rate, we'll just do that. The 53 cent rate would have come out to about $422. So the differential would be about $1 a month using that rate. But I've gone back and checked my math on that rate, and I've found that that rate does not actually generate the same amount that an average resident would have. There's some kind of flaw in the state code and the way they approach effective tax rate. And so it's a little bit off. But it wouldn't have generated quite the same as the bill we had last year for an average residence.
Thank you, Joel. Any questions for Joel on the property tax rate, the record vote here that's before us?
Oh, Mayor, did I mention the two dates that are in the report for the, I did not mention those. We're going to ask the council to call a special meeting for the 24th of August for the purpose of holding the first public hearing on the tax rate. And then we're going to ask for the 28th of August, which is the next regularly scheduled meeting, for the other public hearing. And then we can still get notices in the paper in time to do those things and be able to continue with the process on the 24th and then the 28th.
Okay, thank you. And I think if we just follow the recommended statement down here
Yes,
in
sir.
our motion, we will be covered.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Holcomb.
I'm sorry, I was just in line for a motion, if you were ready for that.
Well, go ahead and make one, then we'll see if we've got more questions.
Okay. Move to approve setting the preliminary tax rate of 56.66 cents and the scheduling of the two public hearings for August 24th, 2006 and August 28th, 2006.
Okay, Mr. Sutton.
I had a question, but I'll go ahead and second that. And then may I ask a question
Absolutely.
for Joel? Joel, it's obviously we're going to be making public notices of these rates in the paper, and I believe that's going to be the 4-Star Telegram,
Yes,
because
sir.
that's the paper of the city.
Yes, sir, that's the city's newspaper of record.
Will
Yes,
these
sir.
rates also be on the city's website?
There will be notices published on this, or placed into the city's website, and we will also have to put notices of the public hearings on HCTV as well.
Okay,
So there'll be a crawler on HCTV as well.
thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? We have a motion. Is there any further discussion? Any other questions? Okay, and been moved and seconded. Please register your vote. And that is unanimous. Thank you, Joel. Item 13, we're going to skip tonight. We're not prepared to address that resolution, so we'll move on to item 14, an ordinance. This will be a public hearing to conduct a public hearing, consideration or action on comprehensive zoning ordinance number 0-2002-032-15. The comprehensive zoning ordinance of the city of Haltom City by rewriting section 9, the use matrix. Do I need to read the rest of that?
Sorry, sir.
Do I need to read all of that? Okay, all right. And this will be the first reading, and this is a public hearing, and James Pluska will introduce this item.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, citizens of Haltom City. Tonight we're having a public hearing to amend the city's zoning ordinance, and this ordinance is O2006-01415, and it is the 7th zoning case of this year. We're looking at two sections of the ordinance. Section 9, the use matrix, which regards permitted and conditional uses in the zoning ordinance, and revising Section 28, definitions, which provides various definitions of these permitted uses as well as definitions within the zoning ordinance itself. At their meeting on July 25th, 2006, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the above said amendments that you have tonight. They did include some changes at the P&Z meeting. These changes to the zoning matrix, which is Appendix A in the ordinance, and which you have a copy tonight. You have a color copy tonight, by the way, indicating staff changes and recommendations by the Planning and Zoning in red, and then economic development consultant changes, which are indicated in the matrix, is shown in blue. For example, if you'll look at, we pointed this out in the pre-hearing, on the matrix, page 9-7, warehousing and storage of commodities, economic development recommended deleting the conditional uses in the C3 district for this use, and therefore establishing just a conditional use in the C4 for these two uses. Also, yes, Mayor?
What is the D code?
The D was to delete that and not indicate a P or a C.
Okay, thank you.
In the Texas Zoning Enabling Act, that which is not specifically permitted is not allowed. Therefore, the P represents that it's permitted, and the C represents a conditional use. We wanted to indicate the changes, and that's why we indicated that as a D for deletion. Also, Appendix B to the ordinance amendment is Section 28 in the definitions, and we've included changes in lighter text for you tonight on this 50-page document. And these changes to the definitions more or less correlate with the matrix. For example, in the 2002 amendment, there were some matrix listed of permitted uses, but they weren't defined. So in this amendment, we are clearly defining those uses, and the definitions interact more clearly with the matrix. This was at the suggestion of the city attorney's office, but also, again, through economic development and through staff review of the amendment. This one you face tonight. Again, these will be attachments to this ordinance amendment, and I stand to answer any questions. You have color copies tonight indicating the changes, and the changes in the definition are reflected through strike-throughs and lighter colored text.
Thank you, James. Any questions for Mr. Pliska? I have.
Yes, sir.
I have just one quick question on page 9.4 of the use. I noticed we had a change on several of the automobile type usage. Looks like on the automobile and light truck repair shop, tune-up and lube, car wash and upholstery. Several of those that were rendered, I'm assuming they went from permitted to conditional use?
That is correct, Mayor.
Yeah.
And that is to reflect changes that were made by previous ordinance amendments, but also there was some confusion. For example, tune-up and lube facilities were by ordinance changed to a conditional use. Well, some of the auto repair facilities would open up as tune-up and lube facilities and then go into the heavier use of auto repair. So we felt that changing these uses and controlling this from becoming a heavier use, and they're coming to us as a lighter use, we also help to restrict the number of these uses within the community. We're getting a lot, because of the auto sales facilities, we're getting a lot of, and the auto paint and body shops, we're getting a lot of the auto repair facilities also that choose to work on cars and then attempt to sell them on site. So we're looking at it then on a case-by-case basis as a conditional use and preventing these lighter uses from turning into these heavier uses overnight by accepting this type of additional work.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate
Yes,
it. Any, Ms. Branson.
Thank you, Mayor. I also hope that you will point out that now we have an office category that we didn't have in our previous document.
Thank you, and I'd like to bring that up. We were using a WordPerfect program that compressed this row, so to speak, and we lost our office, and when it was sent to the attorney's office and even to the web page, it did not show the office. Well, we have office zone districts and office zone properties within the city that we need to have these list of uses for, as well as existing, it exists in the zoning ordinance itself as a district, and therefore we want to continue to have it in the matrix. And that was one of the problems that we noticed in the copies that was on the internet and the copies that was in the attorney's office and in the city secretaries, that the old WordPerfect program compressed. Now it's in Excel format and we don't have that problem. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Pliska? Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Mayor.
it. Now, this is a public hearing. Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to ask a question or make a statement tonight regarding this the first reading of zoning ordinance? Mr. Eklund, would you sign in and state your name and address, please?
My name is Racklin. I live at 2532 Oakwood Terrace. First off, I wanted to thank the staff and whoever's responsible for addressing the issue of the day labor. I noticed in the definitions, the day labor as part of a labor, employment agency. Thank you. They've addressed that. That is a problem, and it is something that maybe we can make some improvements on. Also, I noticed on page 9, section 9, in the item J, manufacturing and industrial uses, you allow storage of stone, rock, and gravel in M1 and M2. I don't know, and those kinds of things. That would allow in some instances for it to be very close to. For example, I own an M2 piece of property right next to somebody's house. I could start a stone yard and a gravel trucks, all that kind of stuff, right next to those people's houses without anything. So maybe those kind of heavy uses ought to be considered as conditional, even all the way through there. I think that might be a bit of a problem. Also, I know it's probably too late for this particular ordinance, but I'd like for you to think about it. Of course, we can always come back and amend these things. Under residential uses, as we look toward the future and redevelopment and density changes and urban lifestyle changes, just we'll hope that some of these things will change, maybe even conditional, where you might have a duplex in a basically what might be considered in mixed use, in an industrial area, not industrial, but a retail area or a single family area, different kinds of uses, so that we start moving with the times and catching up some of this. I spent some time this weekend over in North Texas premier multi-use, they call it the Addison Circle, the Dallas Donut over there. What a place that is. That is something else. And I know we're not going to get there overnight, but the concepts are there. And I made note of the concepts, and we'll visit about those another time. But again, this section, but I would like for you to consider some of this heavy use over here, as maybe you want to amend that or give some more thought to exactly what you're going to do with these outdoor gravel storage and things. And I don't know what all staff has to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eklund. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could we get Mr. Pliska's opinion on the storage of stone, rock, and gravel? Or do you have one at this time?
Yes, sir. In the definition, we tried to address that as it becoming more containerized rather than in a more or less aggregate form spread out throughout the site. But that brings up a very good point, because most of the properties surrounding where you've just heard where the library is going to be built tonight is zoned M1. And that is kind of a heavy use to have adjacent to some of the properties that we have plans for in the future. So I stand behind him on that, and that might be a good idea to change that as a conditional use, because that can become a rather dirty site. With the rough storage of rock, sand, and gravel in an M1 area, that can produce performance-type standards of particulate matter and dust and things of that nature. So as we are tightening up some of these other permitted uses, it might be a good time to look at that. That is, again, raw storage of stone, rock, and gravel, and does indicate it as a permitted use.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sutton.
Thank you, Mayor. This is directed to the attorney. Is it possible for us to change part of this grid right now and make that an amended motion to this? Or would you recommend that, or would you recommend it for study versus changing it here at the council level?
No, that's exactly why we're here tonight, and having a public hearing and having the ordinance come before you. You certainly have the prerogative in your motion to make any changes that you think are appropriate.
Any comment to the effect, appropriateness? Do we run into any legal problems with changing this particular storage process, or I'm sorry, the storage of stone, rock, and gravel from a permitted to a conditional for the M1 and possibly the M2?
We don't run into any legal problems. What's a possibility here is you may have a use that is already operating in the M1 or M2 district as a legal permitted use, and if you change it to require a conditional use permit, then they would become a non-conforming use when you make that change. I don't know if we have any circumstances where
would they be grandfathered?
They
No?
would be grandfathered, that's
Okay.
correct.
All right.
Well, James, I'll just ask a question, which, and I don't know how you're going to react to this, but I mean, there's one of two ways to proceed here. You mentioned the one way to store stone, rock, or gravel is containerized, and then another is just the raw pouring out on the ground. Is there? I mean, we could have both.
Yes.
Actually,
Yes, you
know,
could.
you could have one as a permitted and one as a conditional use. Is that something we would consider, or do you think it's just better just to make it? I mean, we can probably handle it all by just making it conditional. That way, it's always comes before.
You would actually, you could make it more preferable to be containerized if you do make it a conditional use, because then during the conditional use process, you can adjust the performance standards of a facility, and that would be one of them. Hours of operation and the amount of dust, glare, odor, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Very good point.
Any other, Mr. Hudson?
Mr. Pliska, and I guess I'll address your comment. Also, Mr. Mayor, the comment you made about taking on a case-by-case basis whenever we make adjustments like this, especially when we assign a C with respect to those, does that fit within our overall club or within our overall comprehensive land use plan?
Yes, it does, in terms of you are just fine-tuning the district standards with a conditional use permit, as opposed to just outright granting it as a permitted use. With the land use plan, you're indicating that those are districts and that you're realizing certain permitted uses will be allowed in that district. However, you wish that in some cases you want to tighten up those uses to protect the surrounding properties. Right.
That's the very point I was trying to make. Make sure that at some particular point in time we go back and readdress those things and it conforms to the changing times, as Mr. Eklund made comment, but also fits the what we envision as our overall land use plan.
Right. A conditional use permit or a special use permit in some cities, just the planning and zoning and the council looks at it on an individual basis, relative the site relative to the surrounding properties and any sort of adverse impact on the residential areas.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Sutton?
Well, just for clarification, would you recommend changing the M1 and the M2, or just the M1?
Yes, I would recommend changing both. Again, because the city has invested a lot of money into the Wu property, and the surrounding properties can affect our future plans. And this was the goal of economic development and their properties as well.
Okay.
So yes, I would recommend, in fact, I love conditional uses. That way we get to look at them on an individual basis.
All right.
Any other questions or discussion for Mr. Pliska? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, this is a public hearing still. The public hearing is still open. Any other comments or questions from the audience? If not, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a. Is there any further discussion up here? Okay, let's entertain a motion. Mr. Sutton.
All right. I move to approve ordinance number 2006-014-15Z-007-006 with the change to, in the matrix use, table of permitted uses, storage of stone, rock, and gravel will change from permitted for the M1 and M2 to conditional for both M1 and M2.
Ms. Branson.
That would be for a second.
Been moved and seconded to approve with the change to the storage of stone, rock, and gravel from a permitted use in M1 and M2 to a conditional use. Any further discussion? Please register your votes. And that is unanimous. Thank you, Council. And
Mayor,
thank
if I can interject real quick. that was the first reading of the ordinance. When you get this thing back at the next council meeting on the 28th, that change will be reflected in the matrix.
Okay, all right, thank you.
With that.
And want to thank Mr. Eklund for his contribution to that. Thank you. Mr. Sutton?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Oh,
I was going to
okay.
say, thanks, Ray, for doing that, and just encourage other citizens. This is the process that really works whenever y'all come forward and voice your opinion. It really helps. We just appreciate Ray doing it this time.
Okay, next is the Visitor Citizens Forum. This time is set aside for any person having business before the council that is not scheduled on the agenda to speak to the council. All comments must be directed toward the presiding officer rather than an individual council member or staff. Each speaker must limit his or her comments to the subject matter listed on speaker's request form and must refrain from personal attacks toward any individual. Council cannot discuss or debate any issue brought forth at this time, nor can any formal action be taken as it is not a posted agenda item in accordance with the open meetings law. Do we have any? There were no one asked for time. We can, it's still open. You can come forward and speak for 3 minutes. Anyone? Mr. Eklund, sign in again, please.
My name's Ray Eklund. I live at 2532 Oakwood Terrace. Tonight we learned a little bit more about the library. I'm sorry I missed the pre-council meeting where they unveiled the overall plan, but what I'd like to discuss is how we got there. And we have a bit of a difference of opinion about leadership style. I believe strongly that the citizens, we don't just elect you, in my opinion, to go about the business of the city. You know, we should stay involved and we should stay connected. And I strongly encourage all citizens to do that. In the matter of the library, you know, this thing's been dragging around since 2001 when we voted to pass that. And it's now 2006. That's a long time. We've had some delays. Part of which was due to the eminent domain action that the Haltom City took to gain a particular piece of property. Somebody took the leadership decision that that was the place it should go. And then, without much public input, without much meetings, you know, gee, where do you think it ought to go? And then they've come to the conclusion that they should move it from point A on the property to point B and maybe even, you know, somewhere else. And that's cost us another delay. And consequently, tonight we learned more expense. Libraries, to my understanding from some national standards, should have 1 square foot per citizen. That would put us at approximately 40,000 square feet. We started off 5 years ago with the discussion that we're going to have it 25% below that maybe 30,000 square feet. So we're already in the hole. Back to earlier comments about design ideas. Now, I have had the privilege of designing an addition to my house. And I'll tell you, and maybe some of you have built your own houses or other buildings, you don't start from the other end and work your way backwards. Okay? You start from what your needs are. And what you learn in design is you can start with as simple as a bunch of circles on a napkin and work your way into the final product. I designed a house to my family's needs, as anybody would, based on discussions with my family. That's how I think the library design should have went. Apparently it has not. I approached the library board a year ago or so. You
have about 30 seconds, Ray.
Thank you. I'd taken the trip. I brought pictures. I asked to have charrettes, which is a meeting to bring in the stakeholders of the community to help figure out what our needs might be. And if I could have just a minute extra, Mr. Mayor. But anyway, we didn't have those things.
I'll grant you 1 minute.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now here we are on the other end of the process saying, well, these are the concepts, and now we're maybe touch up the building a little bit. The concept design really comes in the circle drawing at the very beginning of the process. And I'm sure the architects have done a fine job. with the task that they were given. However, I think the leadership didn't give them the right task. I think the task should have been given to the architects to go out here and let's find out what our community, this is our community. This is our library. This is going to be the jewel of Haltom City when it's done. Right? And I believe it should reflect the citizens, all the citizens from every corner of this city in its end result. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Eckler. Anyone else wish to speak on the Visitors Citizens Forum tonight? If not, we will close that and move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the resignation of board members. Anyone have a resignation? Mr. Sutton.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a resignation. Received a letter from Donna Larson on the library board, and I'd like to submit her name for resignation from the library board.
Any discussion? If not, please register your vote. That resignation is confirmed unanimously. Any other resignations to handle? Now we'll go to the next item, appointment and reappointments to boards and commissions.
Thank you.
Mr. Sutton.
All right. Yeah, I do have, by the way, I wanted to say thank you for Donna Larson for filling in, and she did an excellent job of taking charge and providing valuable input into the library board from what I've heard from the library director and some of the board members. So I thank you for her. I do have a nomination ready for the library board. Previous board member, Betty Bronstead, and I just submit her name. She lives at 4710 Northeast Lorraine Street. I'd like to submit her name for approval for library board.
All right. Please register your vote. And that is unanimous. Any other appointments tonight? If not, we'll move on to the next excused absence of council members. Do we have any? We don't have any. Everybody's here tonight? Okay. All right. Then that's it. Yeah, I am disappointed. Oh, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to take this brief opportunity to congratulate our Assistant City Manager, Mr. Chuck Barnett, for making it through his probationary time period. I believe that's correct, Mr. Muir. And did he successfully complete his time and all the tasks?
He's still working here, so I guess he did.
Thanks, sir.
He'd be awful disappointed if he's sitting here working overtime tonight. All right, thank you. Now we will adjourn this particular session and meet in executive session at 8:15.
Mayor, I need you to read the section number 551.071.
Section